Just waiting for my screen to load. Hopefully we're live. Hello if you've joined already. Are we live? We're live. Am I the right way up this week? Yes, I think I am. Amazing. Hi Colleen, thank you for coming back. We're looking good. Okay, who have we got joining? I think my screen is on a little bit of a delay, so hello if you've joined. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm Nikki. If you didn't join us last week on Friday, I am a student at the Vegan Chef School and I'm dropping in every Friday at 12 PM to show you one of my recipes. My background is sport nutrition. I studied that at university, so I will drop in a few little nutrition tidbits for you and you can ask me questions. But don't be under the illusion that everything I eat is super healthy. I definitely had a coffee cupcake and a iced latte just before this to get me going, so it's all about balance. The recipe I'm going to show you today is a lovely little snack. Hi Sheila, you're brand new, amazing, thank you for joining us. Hi Deborah. Okay, so the recipe I'm going to show you today, my boyfriend is a personal trainer, so he's really into his exercise and helping other people to do that too. So he wanted some high protein snacks. So I started making these little flaxseed crackers, which are really, really simple, really easy to make, to go with different kinds of dips. So today I'm going to show you a beetroot hummus, which is not really a traditional hummus, but it's kind of a quick, easy, delicious, really healthy little dip that you can knock up, and it looks really bright and beautiful because of that beetroot. But on the subject of hummus, the 13th of May is International Hummus Day, so in a couple of weeks' time we're going to have a big hummus week. I believe Katie is having a slot on the 13th of May and she's going to show you proper hummus, and then the rest of us might be doing some other things with hummus around that. So that's a date for your diaries. Before we get started, another little bit of housekeeping. All of our live recipes are now up on the Vegan Chef School website, so that's www.theveganchefschool.com, and you can go onto the recipe section and then you can find the section that has live recipes and everything that we've been doing for the last month. Yes, 1 month today we've been doing these lives for. All those recipes are on there and the videos are on there too, so that might be an easier way for you to search for the recipes and find them if you saw something or if you just want to have a browse through what we've been doing. So yeah, you can find us all on there, you can find where to find more out about us as well. Okay, so on to today's recipe. It's still dragging a little bit here on the comments, so I'm sorry if you've asked a question or left a comment and I haven't seen it yet. I will keep checking in with that. So we're going to start with our flaxseed crackers. So this is a really, really nice, easy one because essentially you've got a 2-ingredient dough. So the flax seeds are really, really nutritious, but actually if you eat them whole, they're quite resilient, so they can actually just kind of go straight through your digestive system and you don't get any of the benefit from them. So grinding them up is a really good way to sort of make that nutrition in there more available to you. So within here you've got protein, you've got lots of soluble fibre, which is really good for your digestion, and then you've also got omega-3 fatty acids, which are really good for us. So yeah, grinding them down allows you to absorb more of the nutrition from them, but it also means that that soluble fibre is available to water. So when we mix water together with it, the flax seeds will absorb some of that water and create like a gel. So this is really useful for us as vegans. It can be used as an egg replacement. So if you need something that needs an egg to bind, you can use flaxseed diluted in some water, create a gel, let that sit for a few minutes, and then you can replace an egg with it. But in this recipe, we're actually not going to dilute it to such an extreme. We're just going to use some water to bind them together, and then we're going to roll it out into a dough. So I have got Pauline, is that the same as flaxseed meal? Yeah, absolutely. So I buy my flaxseed whole and then just grind them in my blender, but you can also buy flaxseed meal or ground flax seeds or milled flax seeds. They're also sometimes known as linseeds. I think in the UK they're usually labelled as linseeds. In America I think they're mostly known as flax seeds. So I use the golden ones just because I like their colour. You can get brown ones too, and that will work in the same way. So I've got 100 grams of the ground flaxseed. We'll just pop those into a bowl. And then we're going to add, I've got on the recipe here 5 to 6 tablespoons of water. I would start with 5, mix the dough together, see how it's feeling. If it's still falling apart a little bit, add the 6th one in and just mix that in. But you don't want to go too far because you're going to have to bake that moisture out again to get them to be crunchy crackers. So we'll start with 5, let's see if I can count. And then we'll add some flavourings in. So I'm going with rosemary as my lead flavour because I think it smells amazing when you're baking them, and it also tastes delicious. So it goes with quite a lot of different dips. So I'm going to go in with a tablespoon of dried rosemary. Sorry, a teaspoon, not tablespoon. You can go tablespoon if you want, if you're a really big fan. It might be a little bit too much. And then just a 1/4 teaspoon each of garlic granules and onion granules. So these are just going to add a little bit, they're completely optional, they're just going to add a little bit of like savouriness. If you don't want them to be too savoury, then you can leave those out. And you can flavour this with whatever you want. And then just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So then just get a spoon, and we're just going to mix that together. So you can see it kind of looks like, can you see in here? Kind of looks like wet sand. And actually at 5 tablespoons that feels quite good to me today. Depending on how fine your flax seeds are ground, because I do mine myself, sometimes there's still some larger pieces. So if they're really finely ground, they might take a little bit more water. If they're not, then you might need a little bit less. So just kind of use your judgment, but you want a dough that will press together kind of like that and stay. It is quite a sticky dough, so to roll that out, what we're going to do, I'm just going to rinse my hands. To roll that out, we're going to use 2 sheets of parchment paper, and we're going to roll it in between. So I'll just clear down these. So you're going to cut your sheets to about the same size. And if you put them down on the counter with the edges rolling down, it actually helps them stay flat easier. A little tip for you. So we're going to take the top layer off. Oh, my hog thinks it wants to get involved. Okay, so we take our dough. Just press it all together in your hands. And then just flatten it. Sorry about that. Just flatten it into sort of a flattish shape. Maybe tidy the edges in so that when we roll it we get a nicer even shape. And then you're going to place that sheet back on top. Some comments on the sound. Maybe I'm a little bit too far away from the camera. I'll move that a bit closer. Is that any better? I can talk a little bit louder. Okay, so we've got our dough flattened between those 2 sheets. We're going to take our rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use like a big bottle that is heavy and long enough to roll. So a wine bottle, for example, a vodka bottle, an olive oil bottle. So we're just going to roll this till it's about You want it somewhere between about 3 and 5 millimeters thick. And I'll show you how to kind of gauge whether you're at the right sort of level in a second. And with these quantities, you can, if you want to make a bigger batch, say you're having friends around, obviously not right now, but in the future, if you're having friends or family around and you want to make some snacks, or you just want a bigger batch for the week, you can just double the recipe. And that will work equally if you want to make a smaller batch. I did a half batch the other day, and that was about enough just for 2 people, just to have a nice little snack in the afternoon. Okay, so what you might want to do with this is just tidy some of the edges back in so that we can get some kind of nice shapes going. And hopefully you can see here. So to gauge the thickness, sometimes when you're rolling a sheet of dough, any kind of dough, it can be difficult to see or understand if you've got an even layer or how thick really it is in the middle compared to your edges. So what I do is I take a sort of flat-ended little teaspoon and sort of have my fingers kind of a centimetre up, and I just place it into the dough and then slide my fingers down to the top of the dough, and then I can see kind of how thick that dough is. So at the moment I'm probably a little bit too thick in the middle. It's going to take a bit too long for those to bake out. I want to get mine completely baked out so they're nice and crispy. And then if I do the same at the edges, you can see I'm about half the thickness at the edges. So I need to go back to rolling and roll from the middle to try and even that out a little bit. So we'll just do another quick roll, have a look at questions while we're here. Haven't spotted the rainbow yet. I think I might have hidden it. Mistakenly. I'll tidy some things in a minute and see if you can see it then. Someone has asked what the equivalent measurement in cups is for the flaxseed. I don't actually know, Michelle, but I can measure it for you or find out for you, and I can drop it in the comments afterwards. I tend to use grams for flaxseed, for things that are ground, because it's much more consistent. So when you've got a powder, if you're packing that into the cup versus loosely just scooping, it can be quite inconsistent with how much you're actually getting in there by weight, so then it can throw off the ratio of your liquids and your flavourings. But I can get you an approximate measurement of how much that would be. Okay, so a little bit more rolling. So you've got this nice sheet of dough with a hole in it. Hopefully yours doesn't have a hole in. And then what we're going to do is transfer that onto a baking sheet. So I've just got my baking sheet over here. Right there. Just gently lift it. And then we're going to score it into whatever shapes you want. So you could do like thins, you can do squares. Obviously our edges aren't completely square. If you want to take the time to square up your edges, you absolutely can. You could cut this square, then re-roll those edges into another piece and then cut those square. I actually quite like them looking a little bit rustic, so I'm just going to gently score. You don't want to go all the way through, you want to go about halfway through, and this is just going to mean that when we bake these, we're going to half bake them, then cut them and separate them, and then fully bake them. And this will just mean, this scoring will just mean that they don't sort of shatter when we try and cut them. I'm just lightly scoring them. And I'll show you this before they go in the oven. I've got my oven set to 180 degrees Celsius, and my oven is a fan oven. I will say that ovens don't always run at the temperature that you've got them on, so with this recipe, because it's quite a short bake, and if you overdo it, they're going to burn quite quickly, I would err on the lower side and keep an eye on them. So my timings are 10 minutes for the first part of the bake, then we cut them, and then another 10 minutes. But actually, I would just keep an eye on them every 5 minutes the first time you make them, just so you understand how your oven is dealing with these, because you don't want burnt crackers. And sometimes those edges can go a bit darker before the middle does as well. That's why we cut them and separate them out to help them all brown evenly. Okay, so I'll show you this. That's our sheet. You can hopefully just see a very lightly scored squares across my sheet. And then I'm just going to pop that into the oven. So set the timer for 10 minutes. So we'll get those back out and rejig those when they're ready. And we'll clear these away. And while they're baking, we'll get on and do our dip. So I've got all my dip ingredients on this lovely little tray. Okay, so for our hummus dip today, I'm using butter beans. They're actually my favourite bean. I think they just have a lovely, creamy, dense texture. I love them in salads, I love them in dips. What else do I use them for? I mean, I can just eat them straight out of the can. I just think they're really lovely, nice neutral flavour. But you can use chickpeas, you could use any white bean really. You could use other, like darker beans, the colour will just be slightly darker, but you've got the beetroot in there anyway, so you can just essentially use what you have. So we've got 1 can of butter beans, which I've drained, and then over here I've kept the liquid, which is similar to aquafaba that you would get from a can of chickpeas. I have tried using this as aquafaba before, and it was slightly less firm when I whipped it. That might have been me being inconsistent with my whipping, but it just made a much softer mayonnaise than I would usually make with my chickpea aquafaba. So you could use that and reserve it and use it as aquafaba, but it might take slightly more whipping. Butter beans have slightly less protein, I think, than chickpeas, so I think that is the difference. So we're just going to pop our butter beans into the food processor. And then we've got 200 grams of cooked beetroot. So I have bought this pre-cooked and peeled, but if you have raw beetroot, you can just peel those and roast those in the oven and then pop those in. It might just take a little bit more liquid because they tend to be a bit denser when you've roasted them versus these is steamed or boiled. Okay, so we'll pop those in. It's a little bit of their juice, but it doesn't matter a whole lot. It will just help. Then we have some tahini. So I like quite a runny tahini. This one is from a brand called Belazou, who make really lovely, or sell really lovely Middle Eastern ingredients, but their tahini is just delicious. So we'll pour that in. That's 4 tablespoons of tahini. I'm a really big fan of tahini, so I go quite hard on tahini in my dips and cooking. If you're not such a fan of it, then you can pare back on that a little bit, and you'll get a more sort of subtle flavour. I've got the juice here of half a lemon, which I've already squeezed. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then I've got some dried mint here, so I quite like the flavour combination of beetroot and mint. I'm going to start with just half a teaspoon. Dried mint is quite a bit stronger than fresh mint, so I would always start with less. As my granny used to say, you can always add more. You can't take it out once it's in. So start with half a teaspoon, taste it, see what you think, and then if you want some more, you can add more. You could change the herbs up and use whatever herbs you like. If you want fresh mint and you have that, I would probably go for about 15 grams of the leaves, 10-15 grams of the leaves instead of and take those woody stalks out instead of the dried. And then just a good pinch of salt. And then we are really simply just going to whiz that up until it's really smooth. We might need a little bit of liquid, which is why I've kept back the beanie water from the can. So we will add maybe 50 mils of that and see how it goes. If it needs a bit more, we'll add a bit more. If it's kind of not blending smooth, it might suggest there's not enough liquid in there. So just add it slowly so you don't end up with a soup. And then, yeah, just adjust it as you need to. Just going to scrape the sides down to make sure there's nothing sticking to the edges. Some in so I can show you. Okay, so you've got this lovely kind of strawberry pink, it looks like strawberry ice cream actually, but lovely pinky beetroot hummus, which is going to be absolutely delicious with our crackers. So, any questions? Virginia, what brand of tahini? Okay, that was Bella Zoo tahini, which is really creamy. There are other ones that I use. I can't remember the brand of the other one I sometimes get. It's a Turkish one. But the ones that come from Middle Eastern brands or you find in the world food aisle, I find tend to be creamier and runnier than, say, the supermarket own brand ones. Who's found the rainbow? Colleen's found the rainbow. Well done, Colleen. Oh, Penelope, that's great. It's great that you're learning so much. Absolutely fire away questions if you have any more questions. There we go, thank you, Jay. That's the link to Bella Zoo's website. I think they're definitely in the UK. I'm not sure if they're in the States as well, but I'm sure you'll be able to find some good tahini in the States. And if you're in London, there's a couple of really good Middle Eastern supermarkets. There's one called Green Valley, which is really good for finding these kind of Middle Eastern ingredients. Cool, I'm just going to check on my crackers and see how they're doing. Okay, so we've had 10 minutes in the oven. Just move this back out of the way. So So we are going to now just slice through this. Now it's had a little bit of chance to firm up in the oven, and it will keep its shape. So just slicing down your score lines until you've got some nice cracker shapes. Okay, so we've got our cracker shapes here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the ones from the middle and put those on the outside edges so that they get a bit more chance to crisp up. And then we're going to pop this back in the oven for another 10 minutes, but I would say check yours after 5 minutes, and they might need up to 15 more minutes, but we'll pop these in. Okay, so question time now. We've got a little bit of time to wait for our crackers to bake, and we've whizzed through and made our dip. So if anyone has any questions, I'm just going to have a little pop onto the comments and see what we've got. Really good advice from Hope there. Tahini has lots of different varieties, so there's roasted, there's raw, there's runny ones, there's thick ones. I actually used to really hate tahini. I went to Tel Aviv a few years ago and I felt really bad because the hummus there I found just not as nice as what we buy in the supermarkets here. I have since changed my views, but I think it was because it's very tahini heavy, so I just found it much too strong, which is embarrassing, so I'm sorry if we have anyone from Israel on. I'm a disgrace, but I have changed my ways. I'm now obsessed with tahini and I use it in all kinds of ways. And actually tahini is really good for us as well. So sesame seeds and tahini are both a really good vegan source of calcium. So obviously you normally get calcium from things like milk. There's still loads and loads of vegan things that you can get calcium from. Obviously you've got your fortified foods, you've got tahini, sesame, pulses, nuts, seeds, things like that all have a bit of calcium in. So that's a nice little tip for you. Colleen, do you have a bird? And that was actually my boyfriend. I have very, very strictly briefed him on the fact he's not allowed to come into the kitchen while I'm on this, but he seems to have forgotten. So that was him having a lovely whistle outside. Okay, Deborah says that her hummus is usually quite thick. Yeah, I find that adding some of the water from the can of beans really helps with the consistency of hummus. I like mine quite sort of almost fluid. I want it to still be scoopable, but I like it to be quite creamy. So just using that water from the can of chickpeas actually helps it kind of loosen, but not so much that it goes really wet and soupy, because it's got some starch and some protein in that water that's come out of the beans. It helps to bind them together. Butter beans are much softer anyway, so with chickpeas I would probably usually add about half the liquid that comes out of the can, especially if I'm making a plain hummus that doesn't have the beetroot in it. So the beetroot is obviously has a lot of water content, so that's going to help with loosening it as well. Oh, tahini cookies. That's a good idea. Ina, can I use brown flaxseed instead of golden? Yeah, you can. Just bear in mind when they're in the oven, the colour is going to be different. So mine are golden and they're going to turn into like a light brown when they're cooked. Yours will go a darker brown. But if you're concerned that they're over browning, just take one from the edge, let it cool for a few minutes, taste it. And this is a really forgiving recipe in that if you think it's burning, you can take it out, let it cool a bit, check it, you can put it back in if it's not quite cooked. And also you can refresh them if you've kept them for a couple of days and they're not as crispy as they were. You can put the oven on again at about 180, pop them in for 5 minutes and let them sort of crisp up again. Hadn't thought that didn't look good. No worries, Deborah. Hope it works for you. Okay. Any more questions? Tahini based, hummus based, or otherwise flaxseed based? Or any nutrition questions? If you want to throw any nutrition questions at me, we've got a few minutes. We can. Are butter beans easiest to digest than chickpeas, Karen? So with things being easy to digest, it's very personal. And nutrition itself is actually very personal as well, so it's difficult to give advice that is going to be really specific to one person without sort of knowing you and your history very well. They're softer, so in theory, kind of logically, you would think that they might be gentler. Chickpeas can also be quite soft though if you cook them for a bit longer. When they come out of the can, they're sometimes still a little bit hard, so if you're putting them in something, just cook them for a bit longer. But I would say try both and see what works for you. Sometimes it can be other things that are going on as well that are affecting your digestion. So things like stress and anxiety can really affect how you digest things and how your kind of in your digestive system feels. So just bear in mind that sometimes if you're trying different foods and you think something maybe doesn't agree with you, it might also be something else that's going on. So try it a couple of times and try and be aware of if you're getting symptoms like bloating or discomfort, try and think about what else is going on and see if you can spot a pattern. But I think they should both be relatively easy to digest for most people. Hopefully that helps. Oh, 100% of us have said hummus is life. I'm so happy to hear that. That's great. Okay, any more questions? I'm sure you must have some. Fab. Thank you, Karen. Okay, I'm just going to have a little look at my crackers, see how they're doing. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, these are looking great. Smell gorgeous. The rosemary really gives them a lovely, lovely smell and flavour. So you can see mine are all a bit rough shapes, but they go kind of a lovely golden brown. So as I said, if you're using brown linseed, they will go darker. Okay, a couple more questions. Oven temperature for the crackers, Angel. So I've gone 180 degrees Celsius which I'm not great in my Fahrenheit, so I apologise. I think it's somewhere around 350, maybe a little bit higher. So that's 10 minutes, and then cut them into your shapes, and then another 10 to 15 minutes. Sorry, that was a housemate. So yeah, I've gone 180 degrees, 10 minutes, and then another 10 minutes. Just spread them out, cut them and spread them out so they get a bit of browning around all those edges. Can beans be too easy to digest? I don't think anything can be too easy to digest. I think if you mean, can it kind of, upset your digestive system? I think again it's really personal. Some people do find that they don't agree with having a lot of beans. One thing I would say is if you're kind of new to eating lots of pulses or fibrous foods, you can actually kind of get your body used to that by gradually introducing them, so having a small amount and then increasing that over a longer period of time. So our body, if you suddenly go from not eating much fibre at all to eating loads of fibre, your body can go, oh, I don't know what to do with it. So you want to have like smaller amounts and then introduce them more slowly if you're finding that they're not really agreeing with you. Okay, so any more questions? Very fast transit time, yeah, I thought that's what you meant, Virginia. Yeah, as I said, if you're finding that they are giving you that effect, have a smaller amount and kind of go with that for a few weeks and see if that works for you. And also try different beans, because some beans will have higher fibre contents, higher protein contents. Some of them have slightly thicker skins as well, which adds to the fibre and can kind of feel I guess more coarse on your digestive system. Chewing is a really important thing for digestion as well. So when you are chewing, that starts the digestive process. So it kind of, chewing wakes up your digestive system and gets it ready to start digesting the food from a chemical perspective, but then also chewing properly physically breaks the food down before the chemical processes are going to happen within your digestive system. So it can be really easy, especially when we're busy, to kind of wolf food down and run on to the next thing, but actually kind of pausing. And a lot of people talk about mindful eating, so sitting and considering the food, really enjoying it, taking your time over it. And I'm guilty of not always doing this, but eating slowly, enjoying your food and not being distracted can really help with digestive symptoms as well. Okay, would you advise canned beans or dried? Either would work absolutely fine. So canned beans are obviously very convenient and quick. Dried beans, cheaper, less packaging, a little bit more time to prep them, so you're going to need to soak those the night before and then boil them, but there's absolutely no problem. The traditional way to make hummus would be to cook your beans from dried, but yeah, using canned is just a little cheat. So nutritionally, very, very similar. Okay, one final bit on fibre. Fibre should slow things. It can actually do both. So too much can do the opposite. So yeah, you want to kind of find the sweet spot for you and introduce over time. Okay. So thank you for joining me. Okay, we've got the oven temperature conversions from Dave, thank you very much. So 180 degrees Celsius is 350 Fahrenheit or gas mark 4 if you've got a gas oven. Okay, so any last question before we hop off? Susie says, do you not need to be more careful using dried? I mean, you need to be careful that they're cooked and that you've soaked them properly. Unless you have a more specific concern. Oh, thank you, Christian. No worries. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I will be back next Friday at midday. If you have any further questions or you want to follow me outside of the Vegan Chef School, I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is Nikki underscore cooks. I can never say underscore. So yeah, hop on over. I'm doing daily ready steady cooks in my kitchen on Instagram stories. So that is just using odds and ends of bits that I've got in the kitchen to make things up. So if you want a little bit of entertainment in the evening, come and join us. Yeah, and if not, I will hopefully see you next Friday. Enjoy your weekend.